Welcome to Trauma, Psychedelics, and Buddhism with Karen Sprinkle, certified psychedelic guide, trauma therapist, and author of The Thriving Self. Drawing from over 30 years of experience in trauma therapy, embodied Buddhist practice, and immersive Eastern living, Karen explores the many paths to healing through conversation with Dharma teachers, scientists, and mental health professionals. Listen in and discover new ways of thinking about what it means to truly heal and to thrive.
Welcome to Trauma, Psychedelics, and Buddhism. I'm very happy and excited today to have with us Dr. Sharon Niv, PhD, a cognitive psychologist. And Sharon, thank you so much for being here. The audience is very much interested in what you have to share. So let me tell them a little bit more about you formally. So Dr. Sharon is a cognitive psychologist exploring how contemplative and therapeutic methods can reshape mental wellness. Her work spans mindfulness, cognitive science, and the psychology of consciousness, with a special focus on how altered or expanded states of mind can promote emotional growth and resilience.
It sounds nice.
I was just going to say that even before I keep reading. It sounds great. In 2022, Sharon co-founded Joyous, PBC, a public benefit company dedicated to making mental health care more affordable and accessible through low dose or psycholytic approaches to ketamine treatment. At Joyous, she leads clinical research, designs digital therapeutics optimized for the psycholytic state, and developed Joyous for Therapists, a free training and collaboration program helping clinicians integrate these methods safely into their practice. How amazing is this? I'm going to keep reading though. Sharon is passionate about bringing new insight to the conversation on mental health, how lighter touch, more personalized approaches to psychoactive medicine can unlock self-understanding, compassion, and long-term healing. She hopes to share with you, the audience, how cognitive mechanisms of psycholytic and psychedelic medicine can inform a new era of personalized, evidence-based mental wellness.
Thank you.
Wow, thank you. My goodness, our world needs this and needs you, Sharon.
Thank you.
Yeah.
He is really happy to be offering this to the patient base. Absolutely.
Well, if we can start just by finding out more about you and what brought you to this? We know you're a cognitive psychologist. We know that you've founded Joyous, but what brought you to this passion?
Absolutely. So I discovered meditation and the Buddhist path probably in 2012 or 2013, maybe slightly before. As a graduate student, I was a teaching assistant for the Science of Happiness course where I did grad school at USC. And one of the things I remember learning is from Jonathan Haidt's book. He said there are 3 ways I've learned of actually changing your happiness set point. And they are medication, meditation, and cognitive work, cognitive restructuring. And I said, well, meditation, I'm not big on medication. I have a pretty sensitive system I've tried SSRIs in the past during, periods of anxiety or depression, and it doesn't work well with my system. So that was out. I quite like cognitive restructuring, but as I was teaching this to my students, I thought, my goodness, I should be doing what I preach and I should start meditating. So I started doing an MBSR course at the time. That's the Jon Kabat-Zinn 8-week course that brings in, Western mindfulness in service of mental health. And that's when I maybe first caught the bug, but the bug really sunk in maybe in 2013 when I sort of learned that enlightenment is real. And it feels like my, my history was coming from a very, what you might call orange meme in the parlance of spiral dynamics, but a very scientific worldview, very materialist. My dad is a physical chemist. And my mother's also a psychologist, but very academic oriented family, very much scientific in the world. And I think I thought that enlightenment was a myth. Some people believe in astrology or angels, and some people believe in enlightenment. And at this point, I don't know what the metaphysics are of just about anything, but I know that the enlightenment state is quite real. And at that point in time, it occurred to me that all of this work we're putting in to build technology to save the environment, to try to improve healthcare outcomes, of course, to build, mass scale weapons ostensibly to make us safer, but, in reality, there's the shadow side of making us less safe. All of that is not going to solve the problem that's caused by the human psychology and the human consciousness. And that if we are the ones creating all of these problems that we're working so hard to solve, that maybe the best spent energy is turned inward to try to raise human consciousness and heal. And so I tried various projects to try to bring that about. Some of them are still alive. But when I was presented with an opportunity to join the founding team of Joyous, at the time it was our chairman and our CEO and myself sort of ideating on what we can do. And the chairman himself has had a lot of insight into the power of psychedelic healing. And he told me my next business will be in the psychedelic space. And we started ideating on it together. At first, we looked at high dose ketamine because, of course, ketamine is the only legal psychedelic currently available to the American public. Psilocybin and MDMA are extensively being studied and researched, but they're not yet available for patients outside of research studies. Same with ibogaine, even ayahuasca is being studied, but and that, of course, has its own ecosystem because there's some allowance for religious practice. So that's a different conversation altogether. But ketamine as a medicine is the only one that's broadly prescribable. And so we started ideating on what we can do to bring this forth to the population of people who need healing. And we noticed that there were already some options available for high dose journeys using ketamine. Now, ketamine is sometimes in debate as to whether it's a psychedelic or not a psychedelic because it doesn't work on the serotonergic system that more classic psychedelics like LSD, psilocybin, even ayahuasca work on. It's not a serotonergic drug. It works on the glutamate system. So there's all sorts of academic debate about whether or not it's actually psychedelic. I'm less interested in that debate because the truth is, it's the experience of high dose ketamine for those who have experienced it can be very much psychedelic. There's a lot of visualization. There's ego death as a potential, depending on the dosage. And there is the kind of immediate and dramatic shutdown of what we call the default mode network, which is a brain network that is active for the most part when we think of ourselves, when we play autobiographical memory, when we evaluate whether we should have said that thing or not, when we kind of think through, what do I need to do today? All of that activity falls under the default mode network. And in high doses, that can get quite shut off with ketamine. But so we noticed that exists. There are IV clinics that are doing this. There are therapists who work with prescribers to obtain these larger doses, and they have journeys in their offices. Typically, it's like a 3 or 4 hour long experience where a client comes in, they set the intention, perhaps they do a meditation, they've had a preparation session already to set intentions for what they want to work with. And then the client lies down, puts on eye shades, there are playlists that are well suited to the state, and they're kind of on a journey of their own mind. You can set an intention, but if your mind decides, actually, you weren't looking at the right thing and we're going to go here now, that's where you're going to go. And there's a beauty to that and there's a power to that. And by no means is Joyous opposed to higher dosing. It's just that when we looked at the landscape, we said that exists, but what doesn't exist is the skill building approach.
Absolutely.
The go low, go slow is that one of our collaborators, a former veteran, and he's a master of divinity. He's a
Mhm.
spiritual healer. He used that phrase, and I take it from all the time. Thank you, Keith Feitzen.
Mm.
And it is a gradual, gentle approach where the clients or the patients are fully oriented, meaning they know who they are, where they are, and what they're doing. That those are the
Mhm.
when you do a psychiatric interview, you have to say oriented times three
Yeah.
in your report to mean this is a person who knows who they are, where they are, and what they're doing. And these lower doses of ketamine that we prescribe does allow for that. And
Amazing.
so what we find is that over time, the patients who've been with us have slowly and gradually developed healthier, deeper relationships with their inner being, with
Mhm.
their inner wisdom, with their inner compassion, with what, the IFS practitioners would call self,
Mhm.
or the DBT practitioners would call wise mind, and what more spiritual practitioners would call true nature.
Yes.
Um, and so ketamine in these lower states, lower doses, it does
Mm.
quiet the default node network
Mm.
without obliterating it and taking it offline. So yeah, it's been a beautiful journey to get to see how people have been using it.
Sharon, this is really not only revolutionary, but also in line with trauma treatment. As you know, I'm a trauma therapist. And in all trauma modalities, whether we're talking EMDR, brain spotting, somatic experiencing, sensory motor, IFS, right?
Mhm.
We have to have a sense of self agency throughout the treatment in order for it to heal. And
Absolutely.
I am a ketamine provider myself. And when clients start to get into that 400 to 500 milligram dosage range, they
Mhm.
often do report that it was really fascinating, but I don't remember much what happened, right? And so
Right.
we then talk about, well, let's scale it back. Let's scale it
Yeah.
back so you actually do remember and we can have a proper integration session. And like you said, skill build, right? And in somatic experiencing, we talk about pacing and titration,
Mhm.
right? And so if we blow someone out of the water with a high ketamine dose, which personally I have loved, I've had extreme beautiful spiritual experiences from it. Um,
And
but the biggest gifts I've had for integration into my own day-to-day life have been that smaller moderate dose range, for sure. Yes.
that's
So I love that you talked about that. I love that you talked about go low, go slow, and the wisdom of that in spiritual traditions as well.
Mhm.
Absolutely. So,
Yeah.
Sharon, would you be willing to share with the viewers your own awakening? Because you mentioned something about how you started to believe in enlightenment.
Yeah. There's do you know the teacher Adyashanti?
Yes, yes.
My
Mm.
my favorite teacher. He talks in one of his books about at some point, I think in his adolescence, he saw the word enlightenment in a book and he underlined it and just knew that it held tremendous
Yeah.
significance to him. And I feel like I had a similar moment. And I was much older. At 2013, I must have been in my late 20s or early 30s, something like that, when I was speaking to a man who runs a really interesting program. It's called Finder's Course. And
Mm.
the idea of Finder's Course is to introduce people to somewhere between 10 and 15 methods that he and his research has found have been the most successful in bringing people to states of awakening. So I was just talking to him to see am I interested in hearing this course. And I said, well, what's the point of this? Is it to get happier? And he's like, well, it's awakening, it's enlightenment. I I had this moment of, oh, that's right. This is real. This is real. And and I was a very serious practitioner for probably about 10 years, and had some pretty deep experiences of having we now talk about predictive processing as a way to understand human cognition, that it's kind of the master algorithm of the human mind is this notion that the mind is constantly predicting exactly what's going to happen next and then weighing it against the sensory input. In fact, we don't live in reality. We live in a simulation of reality, which is pretty self evident when you sort of consider wait, there, I know that all of my experience is happening in my brain. there are no holes in the brain. The brain is receiving electrical signals and constructing reality on that basis. And it can be quite mind blowing to realize, my God, I've never actually directly experienced anything except through my brain. That in itself is a very
Mm.
psychedelic thought, and certainly like people who have practiced Buddhism for a long time are aware of the construction, but that can be a really revolutionary, really radical thought when you haven't come upon that. Regardless, so you think of all these priors as the lenses through which you experience reality, and there
Mhm.
are lower priors like, gosh, I really um, I believe that this lunch place we're going to is not going to be good. And then your expectation
Mm.
of that may actually influence your actual experience. But then there are hyper priors. There are more and more primary priors that go all the way up to the sense of self, the sense of being a thing,
Mm.
being an entity that's not just part of the um, interbeing, intersubjective web of life, where if you actually look down at the physics of it, there is no you in a clear sense, right? That you really are made of space in quite a literal way with your atoms and the way that they really manifest. Um, and even that can fall apart. That's what when people talk about no self,
Yes.
uh, or the emptiness of self in later iterations of Buddhism, that's a
Mhm.
hyper prior that fell apart
Yeah.
around the solidity of the self. So in my own journey, I have had pretty significant hyper priors fall away for glimpses of true nature and reality. I can't say that I'm living from a, non-dual state as baseline. The strongest awakenings I've had have actually been more of the heart variety, which is when
Mm.
it really feels like there's a separation between self and other that falls apart, and
Mm.
there's just such a deep love for everyone and everything. And that's also not a state from which you can be extremely functional. you know,
Right.
you got
Totally.
to scale that back from 100 to, 30, 40 so that you can function in the world and not just be an open energetic field that is able to absorb everything and perhaps be influenced by everything. Yeah, that's my spiritual journey. And I'm still on it very much every day.
Wow, Sharon, you bring such a unique frame of reference to this field, not only the psychedelic field, but the Buddhist field, because of your cognitive science background and even some of the terms you just used to
Mm,
explain what's happening to our mind and our brain. And this brings me to the next topic, which is why the psycholytic dose sometimes is more indicated than a higher dose. Exactly because of that, whatever we wanna call it, the quantum disentanglement moment where we lose a reference from self, right?
mm,
And that
mm.
and, like, again, long-term meditators can handle that probably a little bit, quote, unquote, "better"
With
than someone
practice.
who's never had deep meditation before, but in those moments when that happens, right? And we lose a sense of self-reference, that can be
Mhm.
really terrifying and traumatic in and of itself for people
Yes.
if they don't
If
know
not
how to
ready.
hold it or the assistant's not helping them with it. And I have seen as a trauma therapist a lot of referrals for folks that have had a traumatic journey experience
Right.
because of that, right?
Yeah.
And the wisdom of bringing in those Eastern traditions and
Mhm.
explaining, "Oh, this is what
Mhm.
a beautiful moment that you didn't have an eye. Isn't that profound?"
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
And it sometimes takes months, though, to get people to look back on it as a profound
Mhm.
moment rather than decompensate further.
100%. Yeah, I read the term in a research paper, epistemically transformative.
Ooh, I
And of
love that.
course, that can be extremely positive. Some people come back from, this is what the research around end of life care and psilocybin is about. Some people come back from an ego death experience and connecting with the oceanic love out there and just lose the fear of death. So it can be extremely positive. And
Yeah.
of course, just like you said, I've heard directly from patients. I had an experience that was so destabilizing that I saw beyond veils that I wasn't ready to see. And it took me months to put my life back together. It was
Yeah,
frightening. I wasn't ready for it. And,
totally.
and that's extremely important. And that That doesn't happen with our dosing. That just does not happen. And that's one of the reasons we felt that it was responsible to do telehealth prescription of ketamine in this way. So we're not like, it's not here to criticize other
Sure, yeah.
offerings of higher dosing, but that scared us. It scared us to have someone do a large dose at home with, a family member who was maybe designated their sitter, but maybe it's the very family member who's triggering them. It could
Mhm.
be it can be complicated, and it
Absolutely.
is such an exotic experience for a human mind that isn't prepared for it. That we didn't want to go that route. We really
You know,
liked
she
photos. Yeah.
Well, Sharon, I'm hoping, so sorry to interrupt, but you brought up something that's really important that I know the viewers will want your opinion on, which is that there's a lot of wonderful data out there about ketamine, and there's a lot of cultural misconceptions, right?
Yeah, sure.
And the what happened with Matthew Perry did not help the field. And I think it would be really helpful that you and I talk about that, so that the listener understands that home dosage of ketamine through a provider like Joyous is not the same thing as what happened with Matthew Perry. So do you mind speaking to that a little bit
Yeah, I'd
for our
love to.
viewers?
Matthew Perry is a heartbreaking, heartbreaking story. I haven't personally read his autobiography, but a dear friend did, and she relayed to me that he wrote in there, "I was born addicted." I can't remember if it was meth or opioids, but he was born addicted after being in utero, and
Mhm.
I've struggled with addiction my whole life, and I know the next time I relapse, it will kill me,
Yeah.
and that's what happened. Um, Matthew Perry, first of all, drowned. He wasn't killed by the ketamine. He drowned, and that is a well-known failure mode of ketamine. It's something that happened a lot in the 70s and 80s that people would take ketamine and go in their sensory deprivation floating tanks
Oh,
and die. Don't do that. Certainly don't do that.
yeah.
Uh, Matthew, so yeah, he died from drowning, not from the ketamine itself, but the toxicology report, which was published in the New York Times, certainly people can go read it, is he stated that he had anesthesia levels of ketamine in his bloodstream, meaning that a person who wasn't taking as much ketamine as he had and
Mhm.
hadn't had the brain changes that accompany such high usage would have been anesthetized. They would have been ready for surgery.
Yeah,
They would have been
totally.
out. So the degree of difference in dosing is something like 50 to 100 fold between our doses and what Matthew Perry was on. It's kind of like the difference between taking a Tylenol for your headache and taking the entire bottle, which will kill you and ruin your liver. Dosing is extremely important. This is a very, very safe medication. It has one of the highest safety profiles of any medication. It's routinely used in pediatric surgery. It's used as battlefield anesthesia,
Mhm.
um, because it doesn't suppress respiratory, which
Yeah,
is how we know that Matthew didn't die from respiratory. He died from the drowning. They
yeah,
found, yeah, water in
totally.
his lungs. It is a very, very safe medication, and the amount that you receive from Joyous, if you take the entire amount in one day, which don't do, but that still won't kill you.
Right.
Uh,
That's helpful, Sharon. If you could speak
yeah,
to the family members that are hearing this, right?
yeah,
Because there are people that say it's a small amount, so you can't develop this dependency like Matthew Perry did or die from it. But for the family members hearing this, what if they get the prescription though, right? And it's
mm,
sent to them.
uh,
How is it monitored? Like how does Joyous and other providers know if they're overtaking it?
sure. So we are telehealth, which means that there are various like tricks we need to put into place to make sure that medicine is not being misused.
Mhm.
So, very first thing is by law, our pharmacy will not refill early. It just won't. It will make exceptions if you write in once or twice. I'm going to be on vacation. Will you send it? A month, a
Yeah.
few days early. Fine. If that begins to be a thing that happens more than once or twice, there's a flag that goes up to our care team and we investigate, and that's just not going to be allowed. This is not that program.
Yeah.
So should you choose to take your entire pack in one day, which again don't do,
Mhm.
you're out for the next month. You're out. And if there start to be, we ask. in our daily check-ins,
Mm.
how much medicine do you have left at least once a week? If you have less medicine than our system has calculated you should have,
Mhm.
um, in your next appointment with your provider, they may ask you to show your medicine pack. Um,
Got it.
there are
That's helpful.
various ways that we try to monitor this, but just no, we want to keep our business alive too. We cannot just refill early and send people more ketamine than they're being prescribed.
That's right.
And
Thank you.
we hope that
Even
that's
just
protected.
that information
I know.
is super important, Sharon. Like
Yeah,
just what you just said, right? Like
sure.
it's for those that are listening or they know their family member or their friend that's taking ketamine and they're starting to worry, it's like there's safeguards. There's
There's a
safeguards that you
yeah.
as a company and the providers have. And
Mhm.
like you said yourself, like if ketamine, even if someone were to take that whole dosage, which we would never want someone to do, they're not going
Yeah.
to die from it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's really important that we talk about the benefits. Like, why should people do this? I mean, ketamine changed me and I didn't even know I
Mm,
needed to be changed. So I can
I want
speak
to
to
hear that.
that. But
Yeah. I'd love to hear your personal story too, and I'd love to tell mine as well. But why you should do this?
yeah.
So there are a couple of really significant benefits to the psycholytic state, and that's not a term we invented. It was invented in the '60s to basically mean so psychedelic is mind manifesting, psycholytic is mind loosening,
Hmm.
and that's a nice way to think of it. Um, and there are a few, as I said, key benefits. First of all, because ketamine is a mild, um, it is an anesthetic dissociative, and in the milder doses, the ones that we used, it's not a dissociative state. We're calling it partial dissociation. So
Hmm.
what that might translate to, since you have a Buddhist audience, at least to some extent, they may be familiar with practices that help us drop into spacious awareness.
Yes.
And spacious awareness shares many qualities. It's not a perfect overlap between psycholytic ketamine and spacious awareness, but they share many very key benefits, both for deepening one's own consciousness state and for trauma healing specifically. So I'll get into why exactly. So it can be described as a state where you feel bigger than your body. There's a permeability to the body, and you can kind of feel the space both inside of you and outside of you. And that in itself can be very calming to the nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
Just a relaxation state for sure. It quiets down the narrative thinking, which of course with anxiety, there's, a great deal of obsessiveness. With depression, there's a great deal of rumination. With PTSD, intrusive thoughts, and just a feeling of hypervigilance and the thoughts that come around that. So to have some quieting down of the narrative mind, really supportive as well, to just giving people an experience of a different way of being. It seems to be the case that when people do have a quieting down of the mind, so that's, I think we already talked about the default mode network a little
Yeah.
bit.
Uh-huh.
Uh, the default mode network, of course, active during rumination, self reference. When that quiets down, the literature finds that there tends to be a higher access to spiritual experience,
Yes.
to an experience of true nature, of something greater, of something that feels truer than the egoic mind. And that is, yeah, and that's synonymous to some large extent with like self from IFS, of course, or wise
Hmm.
mind, or I forget what the term is in ACT, but there's also a term for your inner wisdom and
Yeah, I'm forgetting too. Yeah. Hmm.
uh, but and so many traditions, both therapeutic and spiritual, speak to this inner state, your inner wisdom, that the quietness inside that is compassionate, that is grounded, that is sort of unperturbable. Um, and ketamine gives many people access to that for the first time. And
Absolutely.
again, it's not synonymous. There's still a way in which I worry a lot about people getting stuck in state dependent memory. Like, I'm
Yes.
going to be my wonderful self for the hour that I take my dose every day, maybe for the 2 to 3 hours that there's like a nice afterglow after. And then I'm just going to go right back to myself. And I think that that does happen if there isn't enough intentionality. Not frequently. It seems like the
Hmm.
medicine works well on its own, just from our data
Hmm.
collection and our research. But I do genuinely believe that with more intentionality, more practice, more deliberate skill building, and journaling, even just 2 sentences after each experience. Here's what I learned today. I
Yes.
really made contact with this part of myself. I really made contact with my desire for deeper connection. Just just jot it down, and that'll help endure it across time. So the benefits are this psycholytic state does give you this respite from the chattering mind, this experience of spaciousness. And what happened? You're a trauma therapist. We're all more and more aware all the time. Body keeps the score. What trauma means. Trauma means there was an experience that was so overwhelming to the nervous system and to the emotional body that it got locked in.
Yes.
And of course, we resist it with our micro musculature. We don't want to feel that. We keep it tamped down. Of course, we don't want to feel that. It's awful. That is a smart action by the body, but it also keeps it stuck.
Yes.
And so now with the ketamine state, you're a little bit bigger than your body. There's still the nervous system activity happening in there, but you're bigger now. It's less overwhelming. It's less unendurable. And even naturally, it appears to be that just having this loosening allows a lot of that to be felt and released. One of the things we hear most often from patients who just begin treatment, in the first 2 weeks or so, some huge percentage of people will report having what they call like a very emotional experience. I cried like crazy. I was so angry. I really like felt my fear. I wanted to scream. And then it releases, and there's kind of like a step function and up leveling and well-being. And we liken it to a limb that fell asleep coming back to life. That can be painful. Yeah, it can be. But afterwards, it feels better.
Totally.
And so I think that just naturally, the ketamine allows many people to fully experience and release those nervous system sensations and find relief afterwards. But to whatever extent they are also intentional with it and using that time to build their skills, I genuinely believe that that will endure even more. And to that end, that might be a good time to introduce the Joyous for Therapists, which you will soon be teaching a seminar for, which I'm very excited about.
I'm excited for it too. Yeah. Go ahead. Yes.
So Joyous for Therapists came about because we talked to so many patients and we started hearing from them. I'm already bringing this into my therapy. We ran a survey, and of the people who responded, something like 48% are already in therapy. And of those who are already in therapy, 30% of them have already brought it into therapy. So we're estimating somewhere between 10 and 15% of our entire patient base, which we've now treated over 84,000 people.
Wow.
Have already brought this in. That's the estimate. Who knows? Maybe that survey touched upon the only people who ever had, but I don't think so. I think it's happening. And that led us to think, well, that's an opportunity. One patient, I love to share this, said, on my own, I use this medicine to build positive habits, but with my therapist, I dig into the dark stuff.
Ooh, that's a great quote for your website.
She actually used a different word than stuff, but that's okay. Well, stuff. But that's right. That's exactly right. And it's so wise of her to do that, because to dig into the dark stuff, you do need support.
That's right.
You know, and you do need a skilled practitioner there to help you see the blind spots and hold you in care and in love as you touch upon this painful material. And so we wanted to create this program to support therapists in learning how to do this. And I think many therapists know of potentially the opportunity of psychedelic healing, and maybe they're super into it, and that's great. Or maybe they're like, well, I didn't do all this training just to sit there and watch my client on the floor with eye shades, not really talking for 3 hours. I'm here to help them skill build. And this is an approach that allows the therapist to make all use of their skills just with a client who's coming in more receptive, less resistant, more open, more insightful, and then neuroplastic, the stuff that you're doing, it sticks. So we think that this could appeal to many, many therapists who just want an extra tool in their toolbox, especially with people who might have plateaued or gotten stuck and need something to break through what they're not really managing to connect with, not managing the process as well as they'd like. So that's the program. It's free to therapists to be an affiliate of ours. We are putting together a training program, and that's a certificate to work with psycholytic dosing. And that will have it's coming out this month. It's fully APA accredited, CEU credits, the whole shebang. that will cost something nominal. I'm thinking $200, but if people
Oh, wow.
have one
Very
for fun,
affordable.
I just
Yes.
want skin in the game. I just think people
Yeah.
don't value it if it's for free. If, I want people who are
Mhm.
maybe unable to pay just that. They just finished training. They're only working
Mm.
with extremely low income, whatever it is.
Yeah, sure.
Apply for financial aid. We'll work it out. It's not about the money.
Mhm.
Um, and so that will be part of the program is just the training, but that's not necessary to be an affiliate of ours. It will be necessary to be listed in our therapist directory because we want to know that the people that we're listing at least have gone through the certificate. They understand the premises behind psycholytic therapy. Um,
Oh, Sharon,
I-
this is an incredible opportunity. I mean, I can't
um,
tell you how many therapists I know that always comment about the training I've done. And they said, not only how do you have the time, but how do you have the money? Because trainings are expensive for therapists. So the fact that you're even offering something at such a minimal amount to pay to actually offer true healing for clients is an extraordinary, truly extraordinary. And that
yeah,
shows that you are putting action to your mission, right? You're
yeah,
truly
that's
using
great.
teeth and action to actually spread these services to those that are underserved, including
Yes.
therapists, like you said, that are new to the field and they don't have means to pay for a training.
Yep.
So that's incredible. And Sharon, there's so many things you just said. My mind is going in 5 different directions because I would love to talk to you for 5 hours. Um,
Mhm.
one of the things you said, you mentioned spacious awareness.
Awareness. Yeah.
And I just have to name that happened as you said it.
Mhm.
Like, I don't know if you felt that, but there was this
Um,
true feeling of like, okay, we're in spacious
mm,
awareness. We can feel the space in you and me, in the room that we're in. And there's something very beautiful and powerful about how you said that. So I just want to honor that. So thank you. Because I think Buddhist listeners and practitioners need to hear that. And my experience of ketamine is it absolutely brings like spacious awareness and relationship with our subtle body.
mhm.
And I would love to speak a little bit to one of the Buddhist precepts about not ingesting intoxicants, right?
Mhm, mhm.
And I'm
Yeah.
I'm getting more and more monastics to actually come and talk on this podcast, and I have had one. His his interview will be broadcasted in December, but to me anyways, it's very similar to the interpretation of the Bible, literally or metaphorically. And I view that the Pali Canon can be interpreted metaphorically or literally, right? And the Buddha was not alive in 2020. He wasn't in human form in 2025, right? Um,
Right.
and so the way I like to hold it as a human, as a practitioner, and as a therapist is anything that can serve one to serve others is a benefit.
Yeah.
And we take antidepressants, right? We
Sure.
take medicine that
Mhm,
causes a state shift change in our minds. And
mhm.
no one says that that is ingesting an intoxicant, right? And so I just wanted to offer that about ketamine as well. And I like that you also mentioned the state dependency and you want to make sure that folks are not moving into state dependency. And so I know what I like to do with my ketamine clients is I always send them their summary. We do integration during the day of. I send them their summary, and then I always encourage them to
Mhm,
listen to the music that was
mhm,
going on during
mm,
the journey the
mhm.
following day and the weeks following, so that they, on their own, without ingesting the medicine, have a similar experience with their spacious awareness or subtle
Yeah.
body. But I just wondering about your thoughts about if you've had anyone that's a Buddhist practitioner or a
Yeah.
spiritual seeker say anything to you about this ingestion of intoxicants.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first, of course, it depends what form of Buddhism we're practicing. You get to the Vajrayanists, and they're knocking back whiskey, and so it does depend. But more, I have had conversations with more monastic leading folks,
Mhm,
and I respect where they're coming from, and I think that there is definitely a power in building all of these mental habits without psychoactive help. I understand that perspective. I don't
mhm,
necessarily share it, but I certainly respect it.
mhm,
Um, I think that I myself view it with it's kind of like as you said, with more practicality. If there is a way in which medicine can help me to cultivate the skillful ways of being in the world, and I'm
Mhm.
using it with intentionality and not just to have a positive experience. And to be fair, I am not a Buddhist in this respect because I actually support people going out and having a joyful time too,
Mhm.
responsibly. And there are better medicines than than others. I don't really advocate for people going out and doing crystal meth and crack cocaine, but I don't see much benefit in that. But I do find that there are people who really derive joy from
Mhm.
the use of THC in a more
Mhm.
um, in a more social, less therapeutic way, or MDMA, or I don't personally understand it, but classic psychedelics, uh,
Mhm.
LSD or psilocybin, in a group setting, they find it connective, they find it joyful, and joy itself is healing and is a growth opportunity. So
Yeah.
personally, I don't think that any of these things could be. Um, there was a beautiful quote I heard recently that was like, everything is a medicine, everything is a poison. It's all dose dependent and based on your intentionality. And I think that's where my
Yeah.
mind is with this particular one. But I definitely respect people who
Mhm.
prefer to be purists in how they skill build. All respect to that, no doubt. But many other people could really use the assistance. There are so
Absolutely.
many people who want to develop the skillful means of living, of being more connected to themselves and being more capable of connection with others,
Mhm.
to come from their inner wisdom, and they don't have 2 hours a day to meditate. Their lives don't afford
That's right.
that. They
That's right.
are working 2 jobs. They've got 2 kids at home, 3 kids at home. And maybe they have a history of trauma or anxiety or depression that is just so overwhelming that the
Yeah.
support is necessary. And
Yeah.
so no judgment for anyone's,
Mhm.
perspective on this, but I do think
Beautiful.
some people really benefit from the medical help.
Beautiful, Sharon. Really beautiful. And just coming back to you personally, right?
Yeah.
Getting out of like Joyous and the company and our obviously we both love ketamine and this is why we're both committed to helping heal as many people as we can. But what makes you who you are? Like you mentioned your mom and your dad and you mentioned this point of really believing in enlightenment, right? And having a felt sense feeling of that. Like what brought you
Mm.
to now and what makes you who you are?
Yeah. Gosh. I mean, it's such a complex system. There's so many ways to answer that. But the thing that first came to mind, ancestrally, I'm an Ashkenazi Jew. I have 3 grandparents who were Holocaust survivors. And I feel so much of that with me. And that's actually a main journey that I've been on recently is the
Mm,
there was a time in which I sort of thought, my God, I struggle so much personally and my life is peaches. What is going on? My life is
mm,
fairly very fortunate, very lucky. A lot of stability, a lot of support. And it occurred to me that the extent of struggle that I have is understandable when you sort of take the perspective of it didn't start with you.
yes.
And you look at all of the experiences that my grandparents and great grandparents had.
Mm,
And that's something that I still work with very, very directly now. The Most recently, just to get very personal, I realized that there's a way in which I can become very armored, very, and it gives me tremendous strength. I can handle crisis situations. I can be the one to take friends to rehab. I can do things, but the shadow side of that is that when you're armored, you're also not feeling the compassionate connection.
mhm.
Um, and I kind of traced that back in work with my coach, Ajaya, who's one of our meditation teachers on the Joyous platform. She's amazing. We traced it back to my great grandmother who lost a child in the Holocaust and had to
Wow.
armor so that she could continue caring for her 3 other children. You have
Wow.
to. It's
Yeah.
important. Absolutely must. but I still carried some of that with me. And so there was a way in which I had to sort of care but not carry, is how I should put it, to
Mm-hmm.
sort of start a conversation spiritually with the essence, the memory of my great grandmother, and ask to be able to heal this part so that we can be in connection when it is safe. Because right now, at this exact moment, things are safe. And so finding safety is one of my big psycho-spiritual journeys. That's one way I got here. Um, yeah, I mean, I think that that's a good way to explain it. Is I really did grow up in fairly not perfect. We moved here when I was 8 from my family's in Israel right now. My parents are here, and my brother has been in Israel. So I moved here when I was 8, and that was difficult, but it's not a horrible trauma. It's not surviving a war. It's not abuse. And yet there was always a sense of really deep anxiety and disconnectedness within me that I had to sort of start viewing from the perspective of what my genes have been through.
That's right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing more of your
Thank you for
personal
asking.
story. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so important. And it's so important for listeners and viewers right now to really take in what you just said, because even if you're extremely successful, right, have done your work human, and you still feel this feeling of something, right? There's often an epigenetic or intergenerational trauma, and ketamine can help with that, right? Like that is a beautiful way to segue into your genes, which have some kind of spatial, we can get them to quantum theory, although I'm not a quantum scientist, and
Either.
and how they get imprinted inside our bodies, right?
Yeah.
And there's
Mhm.
still a cord, even IFS talks about there's still a cord taking you to the past, right? And we can
So-
feel that. And when we're in ketamine, there's a loosening of that, so
Yes.
that we can turn and care but not carry, acknowledge but not merge.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
That's
And
right.
so I'm really so grateful to you and your ancestors that you have started this journey of self-discovery. And in that journey of self-discovery, you are wanting others to discover so they can heal their ancestral lines too. Absolutely.
I
Yeah,
love the idea of telling people it's a privilege to be able to heal this for your lineage.
exactly.
What an honor. What a beautiful gift you're giving to your ancestors to
Totally.
heal their pain. Yeah.
And that helps people that have survivor guilt of feeling pleasure. It's like
Yes.
you're feeling pleasure so that your ancestors can finally feel free.
Shivers. Yeah.
Yeah.
Joy is the healer.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Sharon, I think with that, we will stop the podcast today because that's so beautiful. I thank you
It's
so
been
much for
such a
being
pleasure.
here.
It's really one of my favorite podcast recordings ever. This is great. I really appreciated this conversation. It feels wonderful.
Ditto. Absolutely ditto. So with that, Sharon, Dr. Sharon Niv, thank you for being with us at Trauma, Psychedelics, and Buddhism. And to find out more about Sharon, there will be a note in the episode, and you'll have a link to the Joyous platform that you can click on and learn more. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Trauma, Psychedelics, and Buddhism with Karen Sprinkle. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. To learn more or to grab your copy of The Thriving Self, visit KarenSprinkle.com. Karen and this podcast do not endorse or encourage the illegal use of psychedelics.